Don't let him forget me. Please, Jungkook, just don't forget me. The scream shattered into the roar of rain and screeching tires, and then everything went black. When Jungkook opened his eyes, the world felt wrong. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, no slow realization, no clarity dawning. Just a quiet, suffocating emptiness, like waking up in a body that didn't quite belong to him. The ceiling above him was white, sterile, humming faintly with fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped insects. His chest felt tight, his head heavier than it should be, as if something had been carved out of it and left hollow. A machine beeped steadily beside him. Someone spoke, but the voice sounded distant underwater. "You're awake," turned his head slowly. The motion alone made his vision blur, like the world lagged behind his movement. A doctor stood beside his bed, eyes calm, practiced, too neutral. "Can you tell me your name?" Jungkook parted his lips. Nothing came out at first. Then after a pause that stretched too long, he whispered, "I don't know." The doctor didn't look surprised. That was the worst part. Outside the room, someone collapsed. Jimin hadn't meant to listen. He hadn't meant to stand there, frozen, fingers curled into the cold metal of the doorframe as if it could keep him standing. But the moment he heard Jungkook's voice, weak, unfamiliar, his entire body betrayed him. "I don't know." Those words echoed louder than the crash ever had. His knees hit the floor before he could stop himself. He pressed his fist against his mouth to keep from making a sound, because somehow, irrationally, he believed that if Jungkook heard him crying, something irreversible would happen. As if even his voice had become too much, too late, he was too late. The rain outside hadn't stopped since that night. It drummed relentlessly against the hospital windows, a constant, dull rhythm that refused to fade. Jimin hated it now. He used to love rain, used to drag Jungkook outside just to feel it soak through their clothes, laughing when Jungkook complained and then laughed anyway. Now it sounded like a reminder, like punishment. 2 days passed before Jimin gathered enough strength to step inside Jungkook's room. He didn't sleep. He barely ate. He just sat outside, watching the door, memorizing the way nurses came and went, the way the machines beeped in quiet intervals. He learned the rhythm of Jungkook's breathing without even being in the room. When he finally opened the door, it felt like stepping into another world. Jungkook sat by the window, his body angled slightly toward the rain. His hair fell softly over his forehead, his expression calm, almost detached. There was a stillness to him that hadn't been there before. Jungkook had always been restless, alive in every small movement, every glance. Now he looked like someone waiting for something he didn't understand. Jimin's chest tightened. "Jungkook," the name slipped out before he could stop it. Jungkook turned, their eyes met. Time didn't slow, it didn't freeze. It simply continued, brutally normal, as if this moment wasn't supposed to mean everything. Jungkook blinked once, then tilted his head slightly. "Hi," that was all, no recognition, no flicker of memory. No warmth that used to bloom instantly in his gaze whenever he saw Jimin. Just a polite, distant greeting. Jimin felt his heart crack, clean and quiet. He echoed, forcing his voice to stay steady. He stepped closer, each step heavier than the last, like he was walking through something thick and invisible. Jungkook watched him with quiet curiosity, eyes tracing his face as if trying to place him in a story he'd forgotten. "Jimin," he said softly. The name lingered in the air between them. Jungkook repeated it under his breath. "Jimin," he frowned slightly, his brows knitting together in confusion. "Why does that sound familiar? Hope is a dangerous thing. It doesn't heal, it doesn't save, it simply gives you something to lose all over again." Jimin's fingers trembled at his sides. "Maybe we've met before." Jungkook studied him more closely now. His gaze softened, not with recognition, but with something else, something instinctive, something deeper than thought. "I feel like..." Jungkook hesitated, searching for words. "Like I should know you." Smiled, but it hurt. "You should." The days that followed were a strange kind of torture. Jimin kept coming back. He told himself it was for Jungkook, for support, for familiarity, for something grounding in a world Jungkook no longer recognized. But the truth was simpler, uglier. He couldn't stay away. Jungkook started to expect him. It was subtle at first. A glance toward the door whenever it opened. A slight shift in posture when footsteps approached. Then one day when Jimin was late, Jungkook asked the nurse, "Is Jimin coming today?" The nurse had smiled gently. "You remember him?" Jungkook shook his head slowly. "No, but I think I'd feel better if he did." That was how it started, a connection without memory, a feeling without explanation. Jimin noticed the small things, the way Jungkook's hand would unconsciously reach out when he sat too far away. The way his eyes softened when Jimin spoke, even if he didn't understand why. The way silence between them never felt empty. One evening, as the rain softened into a quiet drizzle, Jungkook spoke without looking at him. "Did we fight?" Jimin stiffened. "Why would you ask that?" Jungkook's fingers tightened slightly on the bedsheet. "Because every time I think about you there's this ache, like something unfinished." Swallowed hard, his throat burned. "We did," he admitted quietly. Jungkook turned then, eyes searching his face. "Was it bad?" Jimin laughed softly, but it sounded broken. "The worst. settled between them again, heavier this time. Jungkook looked down, guilt flickering across his features. I'm sorry, Jimin's head snapped up. For what? For forgetting, Jungkook said simply, that hurt more than anything, because he didn't even remember enough to know what he was apologizing for, and yet somehow he still felt responsible. Jimin stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not your fault. It felt like it was, it felt like everything was. Later that night, Jungkook fell asleep with his hand loosely wrapped around Jimin's wrist, as if afraid he might disappear if he let go. Jimin didn't move. He sat there in the dim light, listening to the steady rhythm of Jungkook's breathing, memorizing it all over again. He leaned his head back, eyes closing briefly. I told you not to forget me, he whispered into the quiet. Jungkook stirred slightly, his grip tightening even in sleep, and Jimin realized something terrifying. Even without memories, Jungkook's heart still chose him. Not because he remembered, but because something deeper refused to let go. Jimin should have felt relieved, instead he felt afraid. Because if Jungkook ever remembered everything, the fight, the reason he left, the truth Jimin had been hiding, he might not choose him again. The first time Jungkook said Jimin's name in his sleep, it didn't sound like a memory, it sounded like a plea. Don't go, Jimin froze where he sat, his wrist still loosely trapped in Jungkook's hand. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the monitor beside the bed, its steady beeping the only thing grounding him in reality. For a moment he thought he had imagined it, then Jungkook's grip tightened. Stay. The word came out broken, almost childlike. Jimin's chest ached so sharply he had to press his free hand against it, as if he could physically hold himself together. He leaned forward slowly, careful not to wake him. I'm here, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Jungkook's breathing steadied again, his expression softening as if whatever storm had reached him in his dreams had finally passed. But Jimin couldn't sleep after that, because that wasn't just instinct. That wasn't just a vague emotional pull, that was something deeper, something rooted in memory, even if Jungkook couldn't access it while awake. And that meant the past wasn't gone, it was still there, buried somewhere inside him. The next morning, Jungkook woke up quieter than usual. He didn't greet Jimin right away. Instead, he sat there, staring at his hands like he was trying to recognize them, like they held answers he couldn't reach. Did I say something last night? Jungkook asked suddenly. Jimin stiffened. Why? Jungkook shrugged slightly, but his voice felt uneasy. I don't know, I just feel like I did. Jimin hesitated, the truth hovered on his tongue, heavy and dangerous. You were dreaming, he said carefully. Jungkook looked at him. About what? Jimin forced a small smile. I'm not sure. Lie, he was getting used to them. Jungkook didn't push further, but something lingered in his gaze, something unsettled, as if his body knew more than his mind would allow. That afternoon, the doctor came with new results. Jimin stood off to the side, arms crossed tightly as if bracing himself for impact. Your condition is stable, the doctor explained. Physically, you're recovering well, but your memory, Jungkook nodded slowly. It's still gone. There's a possibility it may return gradually. Certain triggers, places, people, emotional experiences can sometimes help. Jimin's eyes flickered. Triggers, that word echoed in his mind long after the doctor left. Because if memories could return, then so could everything Jungkook had forgotten. The fight, the anger, the truth. That evening Jimin didn't stay as long as usual. He kept his distance, sitting farther away, speaking less, avoiding Jungkook's gaze whenever it lingered too long. Jungkook noticed. You're different today, he said quietly. Jimin looked up. Am I? You're quieter. Jungkook tilted his head slightly. Did I do something wrong? The question hit harder than it should have. Jimin said quickly. Of course not. Then why does it feel like you're leaving? Jimin's breath caught because he was, not physically, not yet, but emotionally he was already starting to pull away, because the closer Jungkook got to remembering, the more fragile everything became. It's nothing, Jimin murmured. Jungkook frowned, clearly unconvinced. He shifted slightly, wincing as his body protested, but still reaching out. Come here, Jimin hesitated. Jungkook, please. The word was soft but firm enough to break through Jimin's defenses. Slowly, reluctantly, he moved closer. Jungkook's hand found his again almost immediately, as if it had been waiting. See, Jungkook said, his voice quieter now. That feels right. Swallowed hard. You don't even know why. I don't have to, Jungkook replied, and that was the problem, because Jungkook was choosing him without knowing the truth, without remembering the last thing he had said before everything fell apart. I have to go, Jimin said suddenly, pulling his hand back. Jungkook blinked, startled. Already? Yeah, there's something I need to do. Lie, Jungkook studied him carefully, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Will you come back tomorrow? Jimin hesitated for a split second, just one. He almost said no, because maybe it would be easier to leave now before things got more complicated, before Jungkook remembered enough to hate him. But then he saw it. That quiet, unspoken fear in Jungkook's expression, the same fear he used to have when Jimin walked away after a fight, the same fear that had driven him into the rain that night. I'll come back, Jimin said softly. Jungkook relaxed instantly, like a tension he hadn't even realized he carried had finally eased. Okay. Jimin turned and walked toward the door, his steps steady even as everything inside him felt like it was unraveling. He didn't look back. Because he knew if he did, he wouldn't be able to leave. The hallway felt colder than before, empty. Jimin leaned against the wall once he was out of sight, his breath coming out uneven. He pressed his hands over his face, trying to silence the storm in his chest. How long can I keep doing this? He whispered. Because every moment he stayed, every smile, every touch, every shared silence, it all felt like building something fragile on top of a truth that could destroy it at any moment. And Jungkook was getting closer. Jimin could feel it. That night, Jungkook didn't sleep well. Fragments of something kept slipping through his mind, disjointed, unclear but persistent. Rain, a voice calling his name. Pain and Jimin, always Jimin. He sat up suddenly, breath uneven, his heart racing for reasons he couldn't explain. His gaze drifted to the empty chair beside his bed, something twisted painfully in his chest. You said you'd come back, he murmured to no one. But what scared him wasn't the emptiness of the room. It was the feeling that, somehow, Jimin had already started to disappear.
Jungkook didn't wait for morning. The emptiness beside his bed gnawed at him until it became unbearable, until staying still felt more painful than moving. The machines protested softly as he shifted, wires pulling at his skin, but he ignored them. There was a restless urgency in his chest he couldn't explain, like something was slipping away, and if he didn't act now, it would be gone for good. Jimin. The name left his lips like instinct, not thought. He pushed himself up, wincing as dizziness hit him, the room tilting slightly. His body wasn't ready, but his heart didn't care. Barefoot, unsteady, he moved toward the door, each step heavy but determined. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. Dim lights stretched overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to move with him. Somewhere in the distance, a nurse's footsteps echoed faintly, but Jungkook ignored it. He didn't know where he was going, only who he was looking for. He walked past closed doors, past unfamiliar faces that blurred together, his breathing growing uneven. His chest tightened with every second that passed without seeing him. What if he already left? The thought struck harder than anything else. What if Jimin didn't come back? Something sharp twisted inside him, something close to panic. He picked up his pace despite the weakness in his legs, gripping the wall for support. Jimin. His voice cracked, louder this time. A nurse turned sharply. Sir, you shouldn't be out of bed. Have you seen him? Jungkook interrupted, his eyes searching wildly. Jimin, he was here, he always comes. The nurse hesitated, caught off guard by the desperation in his voice. I'm not sure, you should really. Jungkook didn't wait for her to finish, he kept walking, because stopping felt like losing, because the idea of going back to that empty room felt unbearable. And then, at the end of the hallway, near the dim glow of a vending machine, he saw him. Jimin. Standing still, shoulders slumped, staring down at nothing. For a second, Jungkook just watched him. Something about the way Jimin stood there, quiet, fragile, like he was holding himself together by force, made Jungkook's chest ache in a way that felt too familiar, like he had seen this before, like he had caused it before. Jimin. Jimin froze. Slowly, he turned. Their eyes met again. But this time, something was different. Jungkook wasn't calm, he wasn't distant, he looked shaken, almost afraid. Why did you leave? Jungkook asked, his voice unsteady. Jimin blinked, caught off guard. Jungkook, you shouldn't be out of bed. Me. Firmness in his tone made Jimin's breath hitch. I just needed some air, Jimin said quietly. That's not true. Jimin frowned slightly. You don't know that. I do, Jungkook replied, stepping closer despite the way his body protested. Because it felt like you were leaving for real. Silence stretched between them. Jimin looked away first. You're overthinking, he murmured, but Jungkook didn't stop. Then why does it hurt? That question landed softly, but it hit harder than anything else. Jimin's fingers curled into his sleeves. Jungkook, why does it feel like every time you walk away, I'm losing something I can't get back? His voice cracked at the end, frustration and confusion bleeding through. I don't even remember you properly, he continued, his breath uneven. So why does it feel like this? Jimin couldn't answer, because there was no safe answer, because the truth was too heavy. Say something, Jungkook whispered. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. We were close, he said finally. How close? Jimin hesitated. Too many memories rushed in at once. Laughter, arguments, quiet nights, stolen moments, promises whispered like they could last forever. Enough that losing you felt like everything ended. Jungkook's expression shifted, something deeper settling behind his eyes. Then why are you trying to leave now? Jimin looked at him again, really looked at him. Because you might hate me when you remember. Because the last thing you felt for me wasn't love. Because I'm the reason you walked into that rain. The words stayed trapped inside him. I'm not leaving, Jimin said instead. Another lie. Jungkook stepped closer until there was barely any space left between them. Lie to me. Jimin's breath hitched. You said you don't remember anything, he said softly. So how can you tell? Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. Because I remember how it feels when you lie. That sentence shouldn't have been possible, and yet it was. Jimin's composure cracked. He looked away, his eyes burning. I don't want to hurt you again, he whispered. Jungkook stilled. Again, the word echoed between them. Jimin realized too late what he had said. It's nothing. He tried to brush it off quickly, but Jungkook caught his wrist. Jimin. His voice was softer now, but more dangerous in its quiet intensity. What happened before the accident? Jimin shook his head. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. You won't like it. Jungkook's grip tightened slightly. Me decide that. Jimin hesitated, his heart pounding painfully. He had spent days avoiding this moment, and now it was right in front of him. We fought, Jimin said slowly. Jungkook didn't look surprised. I figured. It wasn't just a small fight, Jimin continued. It was bad. How bad? Jimin swallowed. Bad enough that you walked away from me. Jungkook's expression shifted, something like guilt flickering across his face. Then, Jimin's voice dropped to almost nothing. And then you got into the accident. Silence, heavy, unforgiving. Jungkook let go of his wrist slowly, his hand falling to his side. The last thing I did, he murmured, was leave you. Didn't answer because yes, that was the truth, and it hurt just as much now as it did then. Jungkook looked down, his jaw tightening. That's why you're pulling away now, he said quietly. Because you think I'll do it again. Jimin's chest tightened. I don't know what you'll do when you remember, he admitted. Jungkook looked up at him again. And that scares you. Gave a small, broken smile, more than anything. Jungkook was quiet for a long moment, then slowly he stepped closer again. Let me make this simple. Jimin frowned slightly. What do you mean? Jungkook reached for his hand, this time deliberately, not instinctively, his fingers laced with Jimin, firm and certain. I don't remember the past, he said, but I know what I feel right now. Min's breath caught. And right now, Jungkook continued, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes, I don't want you to leave. The words hung between them, fragile but real. Jimin stared at their joined hands, his vision blurring. You might change your mind, he whispered. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. That's not fair to you. Let out a quiet breath. Maybe not, he admitted. But losing you without even trying to understand this feels worse. Jimin's defenses crumbled a little more. You don't even know why you feel this way. He said. Jungkook's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. Maybe I don't need to. He tightened his grip gently. Maybe my heart already decided, even if my mind hasn't caught up yet. Jimin closed his eyes, overwhelmed, because this was what he had been afraid of, and what he had secretly hoped for. When he opened his eyes again, he didn't pull his hand away. Okay, he whispered. Jungkook's shoulders relaxed just slightly. "'Kay," he repeated. And for the first time since the accident, they stood there, not as strangers trying to fill in the gaps, not as broken pieces of something lost, but as something new, something uncertain, something fragile, and maybe something worth fighting for again. Jungkook didn't let go of Jimin's hand right away. Even after the hallway fell quiet again, even after the distant footsteps faded and the vending machine hummed softly in the background, he kept holding on, as if letting go would undo something they had just rebuilt. Come back to your room, Jimin said gently, his thumb brushing over Jungkook's knuckles without thinking. Jungkook nodded but didn't move immediately. He was looking at their hands, studying them, like he was trying to memorize the feeling. Does it feel the same for you? He asked quietly. Jimin's chest tightened. What does? This, Jungkook said, lifting their joined hands slightly. Like it's not new, Jimin hesitated. It doesn't feel new, he admitted softly. Jungkook's gaze softened, something almost relieved flickering across his face. Then I'm not imagining it. No, Jimin whispered. You're not. They walked back slowly, side by side, still connected. Jungkook leaned slightly into him at times, his steps uneven but stubbornly determined. Jimin stayed close, steadying him without making it obvious like he used to, like it was muscle memory. When they reached the room, Jungkook sat down on the edge of the bed but didn't release Jimin's hand. Stay, he said again. It wasn't a request this time. It was something quieter, deeper, a need. Jimin sat beside him. I'm here. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't light either. It carried weight now, filled with things unsaid, things remembered by one and felt by the other. Jungkook broke it first. What was I like before? Jimin glanced at him. You mean before the accident? Jungkook nodded. Jimin exhaled slowly, searching for the right words. You were, he paused, a small smile forming despite everything. Annoying, Jungkook blinked. Annoying, in a good way, Jimin added quickly, a soft laugh escaping him. You never sat still. Always teasing, always pushing people, always pretending you didn't care when you actually cared the most. Jungkook listened carefully, like every word mattered. With you, he asked. Jimin's smile faded slightly. With me, you were softer. Jungkook's expression changed, something more focused, more intent. Soft, Jimin looked down at their hands. You remembered the smallest things, he said quietly. Things I didn't even realize I told you. You show up with coffee exactly how I like it without asking. You'd notice when I was tired before I said anything. Swallowed. Did I say it? Jimin froze. What? Jungkook met his eyes. That I loved you. Question hung there, fragile, terrifying. Jimin's heart pounded so loudly he was sure Jungkook could hear it. He said softly. Jungkook didn't look away. How? Jimin blinked, confused. What do you mean? How did I say it? Jungkook clarified, his voice quieter now. Was it just once? Or all the time? Jimin interrupted before he could stop himself. The words came out too fast, too honest. Jungkook's breath caught. All the time, Jimin nodded slowly. You said it like it was the easiest thing in the world, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Like you weren't afraid of it, like it wasn't something you had to hide. Looked down, processing that. I don't feel like that kind of person, he admitted. You are, Jimin said immediately. Jungkook glanced up again, surprised by the certainty in his voice. Jimin held his gaze, unwavering now. You just don't remember yet. Followed, but this time it wasn't heavy, it was thoughtful. Jungkook shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing against Jimin's. Then why did we fight? He asked. There it was, the question Jimin had been avoiding. He felt his throat tighten. You said it was bad, Jungkook continued. Bad enough for me to walk away. Jimin's fingers tensed in his. Jimin, Jungkook said softly. What did I do? Jimin closed his eyes for a moment. He could lie again. He could soften it, twist it, hide the parts that would hurt too much, but Jungkook had asked. And something about the way he was looking at him now, open, vulnerable, searching, made it impossible to hide. You didn't trust me, Jimin said finally. Jungkook stilled. What? Jimin opened his eyes. You thought I was hiding something from you. Were you? The question wasn't accusing, it was honest, and that made it worse. Jimin hesitated. Yes, Jungkook's grip tightened slightly. So I was right. It's not that simple, Jimin said quickly. Then explain it to me. Looked away, his chest rising unevenly. I was trying to protect you. What? Jimin didn't answer because the truth wasn't something he could say lightly, because even now, even with everything broken between them, the risk was still there. Jimin, Jungkook pressed gently. What were you protecting me from? Jimin shook his head. I can't. Jungkook's expression shifted, confusion, frustration, something deeper. You're doing it again, he said quietly. Jimin flinched. Hiding things from me. Trying to keep you safe. How is this keeping me safe? Jungkook asked, his voice rising slightly. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be afraid of. Exactly, Jimin snapped, then immediately softened. That's the point. Stared at him. You'd rather I stay in the dark. Jimin's silence was answer enough. Jungkook let out a slow breath, pulling his hand away this time. The absence of his touch felt immediate, cold. I don't like this, Jungkook admitted. I know. I don't like not knowing, he continued. I don't like feeling like there's something important you're not telling me. Looked at him, guilt heavy in his chest. I'm sorry, shook his head. I don't want an apology. Then what do you want? Jungkook met his eyes again, steady despite the storm beneath it. I want you to trust me. Jimin's breath caught. I do trust you. Then tell me the truth. Jimin couldn't, not yet, maybe not ever. Because the truth wasn't just about their fight. It was about what came before it, the threats, the warnings, the reason Jungkook had tried to leave that night. I can't, Jimin repeated softly. Jungkook leaned back slightly, something closing off in his expression. Then how am I supposed to trust you? That question lingered, unanswered. Jimin didn't have a response. Didn't have a solution. All he had was fear and love and the sinking realization that those two things were about to tear everything apart again. The monitor beside the bed beeped steadily, the only sound filling the room. Jungkook stared at the floor for a long moment, then finally spoke. I still don't want you to leave. Looked up, surprised. Jungkook's voice was quieter now. I don't want this either. Nodded slowly. That's fair. Settled again, but this time it felt different, not peaceful, not comforting. Tense, fragile, like something was about to break. Jungkook lay back against the pillow, staring up at the ceiling. Stay anyway, he said after a moment. Jimin hesitated. Then slowly he moved to the chair beside the bed again. I'm here, he said softly, but the words didn't feel as solid as they had before, because now there was distance, not physical, something deeper. And as Jungkook closed his eyes, his expression tight with thoughts he couldn't untangle, one thing became painfully clear to Jimin. This wasn't just about lost memories anymore. It was about the truth, and how much of it they could survive.
The night stretched longer than it should have. Jimin didn't realize he had been holding his breath until Jungkook's breathing finally evened out beside him. The steady rise and fall of his chest should have been comforting, but it was. Not anymore, because now there was distance, not the kind you could close by reaching out, the kind that grew quietly between words left unsaid. Jimin sat in the chair, his fingers laced together tightly, his gaze fixed on the faint reflection of rain sliding down the window. Each droplet blurred into the next, like memories that refused to stay clear. He almost didn't notice when Jungkook stirred again. "Jimin," the voice was softer this time. Awake, Jimin looked up immediately. "You should be sleeping." Jungkook didn't respond to that. He shifted slightly, wincing, but his eyes remained locked on Jimin. "Are you scared of me?" The question hit unexpectedly. Jimin blinked. "What? You keep saying you're trying to protect me," Jungkook continued, his voice low but steady. "But you look like you're afraid." Opened his mouth, then closed it again because he didn't have a simple answer. He admitted finally. Jungkook's brows drew together. "Of me? Of what might happen?" Jimin corrected softly. Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty. Jungkook pushed himself up slightly, ignoring the discomfort in his body. His gaze sharpened, searching Jimin's face like he was trying to read something deeper than words. "Did I hurt you?" he asked. Jimin's chest tightened. "Not the way you think. That's not an answer." Let out a slow breath. "You didn't hurt me because you wanted to," he said carefully. "You hurt me because you thought it was the only choice you had." Jungkook frowned, confusion deepening. "That doesn't make sense." "It didn't to me either," Jimin murmured. Jungkook looked down at his hands again, like he was trying to see the version of himself Jimin was describing. "What kind of person walks away from someone they love?" he asked quietly. Jimin's voice barely held together. "The kind who thinks staying would destroy them." Froze. Something about those words settled heavily inside him, like they belonged somewhere in his mind but couldn't quite find their place. Destroy them how? Jimin didn't answer immediately. He could feel it again, that edge, that line he had been trying not to cross. The moment where silence stopped protecting them and started breaking them. But Jungkook was already looking at him like he needed the truth more than anything, and maybe he did. "There were people watching you," Jimin said slowly. Jungkook's eyes flickered. "Watching me. They didn't like how close we were," Jimin continued, his voice tightening. "They thought you were getting distracted." "What?" Jimin hesitated. "From things that mattered to them more than you." Jungkook's expression shifted, unease creeping in. "And I believed them." "No," Jimin said quickly. "That's not what happened." "Then what did happen?" Jimin clenched his hands together. "They came to me first." Jungkook went still. "They told me that if I didn't step away from you," Jimin's voice dropped, barely audible now, "they'd make sure you paid the price instead." The room felt colder. Jungkook stared at him, something sharp and unfamiliar rising in his chest. "So you decided to leave me," he said, his voice flat. "I decided to protect you." "Lying to me?" "Yes." "Making me think you didn't trust me." Jimin swallowed hard. "Yes." Let out a quiet, humorless laugh. He shook his head slightly. "That's messed up." "I know." Looked at him again, something conflicted flickering across his face. "And I didn't know any of this." Jimin shook his head. "I didn't want you involved. So I found out anyway," Jungkook said slowly, piecing it together. "And we fought." Nodded faintly. "You wanted to face it together," he added. "You said we could handle it." "You didn't believe me." "I couldn't risk it." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "So I walked away." "Yes." Followed, heavy, real. Jungkook leaned back against the pillow, his gaze drifting to the ceiling again, but his expression was different now, less confused, more burdened. "That sounds like something I'd hate," he admitted. Jimin let out a weak breath. "You did." "I still do," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin's heart sank. "I don't remember it," Jungkook continued, "but I know I wouldn't want you to decide things like that on your own." "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Jungkook replied. Jimin looked at him sharply. "When it comes to your safety." Jungkook turned his head slightly, meeting his eyes again. "You don't get to decide that by yourself." Conviction in his voice made Jimin falter, because this was familiar. This was the Jungkook he remembered, stubborn, protective, unwilling to back down when it mattered. "And now?" Jungkook asked. Jimin blinked. "What do you mean, are they still watching?" The question lingered. Jimin didn't answer right away, but the hesitation was enough. Jungkook noticed. "They are," he said quietly. Jimin exhaled slowly. "Yes." Jungkook's fingers curled into the sheets. "And you still didn't tell me." "I was trying to keep things from getting worse." Let out another breath, longer this time. "This is already worse." Couldn't argue with that because it was true, because the distance between them now wasn't just about lost memories, it was about trust, and the cracks were starting to show. Jungkook closed his eyes for a moment as if trying to steady himself. When he opened them again, something had shifted, not softer, stronger. Then we deal with it together now, he said. Jimin stared at him. Jungkook, I don't remember everything, Jungkook interrupted, but I know this much. Voice was firm now. I'm not walking away from you again. Jimin's breath caught. You don't know what you're saying. I do. You could get hurt. I already did. The words hit harder than anything else. Jimin went quiet. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. If they're still watching, then let them, he continued. I'm not losing you twice. Felt something inside him crack open. Fear, hope, love. All tangled together in a way that made it hard to breathe. You might not feel the same when your memories come back, he whispered. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. Shook his head slightly, overwhelmed. You're making this too simple. Maybe you're making it too complicated. Again, but this time it felt different, not like something breaking, like something shifting. Jungkook reached out slowly, not as instinct, not as habit, but as a choice. Jimin looked at his hand for a moment. Then slowly he took it. Their fingers intertwined, steady and certain. Jungkook's grip tightened slightly, grounding. Stay, he said again. Jimin nodded. I'm here. For the first time since the truth had been spoken out loud, the words didn't feel fragile, they felt real. Outside, the rain finally began to slow, the sound softening into something quieter, gentler. But somewhere beyond the hospital walls, unseen and patient, the threat Jimin had tried so hard to keep hidden hadn't disappeared. It had only been waiting.